Most people give up on a dying orchid at exactly the wrong moment, usually about 2 weeks too early. Here's why that matters. An orchid that's lost every single root can still come back to life. Not in a few days. That takes months. But it happens more often than you'd think. Today I'm going to walk you through the real timeline, start to finish, so you know exactly what to expect at every stage. Not just what to do, but how long each part actually takes. That's the part most rescue videos skip entirely. Here's the thing. This isn't a checklist you rush through in an afternoon. It's a timeline, and each stage takes its own amount of time. Rush it and you undo the last stage's work before it's even finished. There's one point in this timeline where the plant looks its absolute worst. Worse than the day you started. And that's exactly the moment it's working the hardest. We'll get there. I've also got something at the end that none of the other rescue plants in this kind of video ever get to have. Orchids carry their own trick for blooming a second time, and it has nothing to do with fertilizer at all. Stage 1. Right now, today. Pick up the pot and take a real look at the roots. Healthy roots are white with green tips, and they feel firm when you squeeze them gently between your fingers. Thirsty roots go silvery grey and papery, shriveled up almost like a raisin. Rotten roots turn brown and mushy, and they'll flatten or squish apart the second you touch them. Here's why this matters. A dead root doesn't just sit there quietly and do nothing. It keeps breaking down. It holds moisture right up against the roots that are still alive next to it. That trapped moisture is what spreads the rot from one root to the next, one at a time. So the first move is simple. Take clean scissors and cut away anything brown and mushy. Cut back to firm white or green tissue. Don't stop halfway just because it feels drastic. One quick note before you cut anything. Some roots grow up and out of the pot into open air, reaching for nothing in particular. Those are aerial roots, and they're completely normal on a healthy orchid. Leave them alone unless the tips have gone brown and mushy too. You can do this whole stage sitting at a table, plant in your lap, scissors in hand. No kneeling by a pot down on the floor. No awkward reaching over a shelf. This is a seated job, start to finish, and it takes about 10 minutes. Stage 2. Roughly 2 weeks from now. Once the rot is cut away, you're deciding what the roots that are left will actually sit in going forward. Bark beats moss for the long haul, and here's why. Sphagnum moss holds water right up against the roots. That constant dampness is exactly what causes rot in the first place. Growers mostly use moss so plants survive shipping and sitting on a store shelf for weeks. It's built for a short trip, not a long stay. Once your orchid is home for good, switch it over. A bark mix with a little charcoal and some sponge rock mixed in drains and breathes far better. And here's how you actually water it. Set the whole pot in a sink or a basin. Let water run through until it flows freely out the bottom. Then here's the part almost nobody does. Do it a second time, just a few minutes later. The roots soak up what they can fast. That second soak lets them take up even more than the first one did. It costs you 2 extra minutes, and the roots notice. Skip the calendar entirely for this. Push a finger or a wooden skewer down into the bark. Still feels damp? Wait. Comes out dry? Water it. Stage 3. And this is the one I promised you. If the roots underneath were badly damaged, the leaves on top are often too far gone to save. Even if a few of them still look mostly green. Here's why this works, and it's going to feel backwards. You trim off every limp, wrinkled leaf, even when that leaves you holding what looks like almost nothing. Picture it, a bare little stub in your hand. No roots to speak of. Hardly any leaves left at all. It looks like it's already over. Don't panic. This is the moment the plant looks worse than the day you started. It's also the moment it's working hardest. Here's why. Every leaf you leave on a plant with damaged roots is a leaf the plant still has to feed. And it has to feed that leaf using roots that can't keep up with the demand. Cut the dead weight, and the plant stops spending energy it doesn't have. Everything left goes into growing brand new roots. Nothing gets wasted propping up old leaves that were never going to make it anyway. Stage 4. Months 2 through 4. This is the quiet stretch, and it takes real patience. There's not much to do but watch. Check the base of the plant every week or so for new root growth. Fresh roots start out as a pale green or pinkish tip, just barely pushing out from the base. That tiny tip, no bigger than a fingernail at first, is your sign things are moving in the right direction. One thing not to do here. Skip the high nitrogen fertilizer during this stretch. The plant isn't trying to grow leaves right now. It's trying to rebuild roots. Pushing leaf growth just pulls energy away from the job that actually matters most. This stage doesn't ask much of you. Mostly, you just watch and you wait. And that's genuinely the whole job. Stage 5. The one none of the other rescue plants in this series ever get to have. Once the roots are solid again, orchids carry their own trick for blooming a second time. It's not about food at all. It's about temperature. Here's the trick. A drop of about 10 degrees between day and night does it. Down around 55 to 60 degrees at night, held steady for 4 to 6 weeks. That's the combination growers and orchid societies commonly point to. It's the most reliable way to trigger a brand new flower spike. In practice, that often just means moving the plant near a window in early fall, somewhere the night air naturally runs a little cooler than the rest of the house. Some folks set it in a room they don't heat as much overnight. You're not trying to shock the plant here. You're mimicking the cool autumn nights it would get outdoors, back where this plant's ancestors actually grew. One caution here, and it matters. Once a flower spike actually shows up, keep the temperature steady from that point on. A sudden swing, hot or cold, can make the plant drop its buds, sometimes before they ever get the chance to open. Steady is the whole game once the spike appears. So there's your timeline, start to finish. Today, you check the roots and cut away the rot. 2 weeks in, you settle on bark and a real watering routine. Somewhere in the middle, it looks worse than when you started. That's not a setback. That's the plan. Working. Months in, you're mostly just watching for new roots to appear. And months after that, a little chill at night can bring the flowers back around. If you're at the stage right now where your orchid looks like nothing but a bare stub sitting in a pot, that's not the end of the story. That's stage 3. And I'll be honest with you, stage 3 is the hardest part to sit through, hands down. It looks exactly like failure. Right at the moment, it's actually working. A few months from now, that same bare stub could be holding a fresh spike of white or purple blooms. You'll know exactly why, because you watched every stage get there. If you're the kind of gardener who can wait out a slow recovery instead of giving up on week 1, this channel is for you. You belong here. Tell me in the comments what stage your orchid is at right now. I'll tell you what to expect next. Happy gardening!